Hey, what's going on, my friends? It is Patrick Lovell, truth bombing, delivering the What the Fuck files on, I guess it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday, February 1st, 2023 at approximately 1:30 p.m. my time. And yesterday afternoon, I had one of those days that was just like the day from hell. We all have them, right? Everything's going wrong in the worst possible way, and you don't feel like you have a lifeline to a good place, and everything is just a disaster. And it just reminds me of a lot of fictional depictions I've seen in times of war or high stress, and when you're in the middle of just a lot of unbelievable things, and you just have to press forward because you have no choice. or do your best interpretation of Tarzan and swing from limb to limb to make things happen. And I'd say I'd pray to God, but I don't pray to God. I don't pray to God because God doesn't seem to have an interest in a lot of the things that I've prayed to him about in the past. Because the bad guys continue to get away with things, and they always have. And do I believe in God and a higher power? Yeah, how can you not, considering the ridiculous, like, question marks of the beginning of time and the Big Bang and the way nature works and all of the unbelievable majesty in the calculus and the gravity and the natural laws and things that happen. But then there's just so much fucking chaos, and you'd like to believe that the good always win, but the good don't always win. And so I just keep driving. I don't know why. I continue to plow forward because I know the difference between right and wrong. And I hope that one day, somehow, some way, that these truth bombs, that these what the fuck files penetrate in a huge monumental way, because I continue to drop monumental information that nobody else can or will. And it's stagnant. It's in a little quarter. It's suppressed. It's canceled. It's oppressed. It's, techno, or I should say, algorithmed, or whatever the case is. And, millions of people may one day watch this and knowing everything I went through and go, holy shit. Yeah, holy shit. But right now, that's not happening. And somehow, some way, I just encourage all of those of you who have been so kind and who pay attention to these truth bombs and who are listening to what my colleagues are putting out there, realize that we have to blast through. That when you have the truth, you are bulletproof, and it's not rocket science, it's racketeering, and that we have the platinum on a platinum platter, the largest criminal revelation in history that never ended. That's a global system. And, this morning I woke up and I was just trying to muscle through all the shit that I've got to muscle through off the information I had last night. And I'll tease just some of the information. I'm involved with a number of heavy hitter documentary investigative projects like you would expect if you know my work and what we do. Once again, to those who are newcomers, www.thecon.tv, and also on any search platform you can find the new Untouchables with the real progressives, which reveals a shit ton of information. And then, of course, everything that I've done on these truth bombs on YouTube. And we're growing. We're growing, in tiny, tiny amounts to get the word out. But please spread the word, break the algorithms, get it to 10 people and tell them to get it to 10 people. It sounds like that Sassoon commercial when I was a kid that I used to love, because I loved this model back in the 70s, for those of you who know what I'm talking about. And they told two friends and so on and so on. But, look, man, last night, and I don't know why I'm smiling, because it's so fucking obvious. I've been engaged with some people that know things about big relationships and how things are thwarted and who has the money and why and what they can do and who's complicit in it. And I can tell you that there is a mass criminal syndicate in a lot of ways. That's basically what the current world sort of infrastructure depends on, that can hide their own indiscretions, their own criminality, their own everything by buying off attorneys and complicit actors and investigators to make things hard for people that are truth tellers. The way this works in Trump world, for example, is, and he's done it, time immemorial, and it is shocking that he's not in jail yet, which makes me think that he's got information on somebody somewhere that makes him somewhat untouchable in a way, because it's just so obvious how many laws he's broken, and yet Merrick Garland is still sitting on it. I mean, his whole platform is lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate. And if you don't know that by now, you're slightly naive, but that's the model. And this information that I have, it definitely leads to the crosshairs of Trump in a lot of ways, as well as his inner sanctum. Jared Kushner. Are you kidding me? As well as Stevie Mnuchin. I mean, it's just, like Trump said regarding 9/11 and last year's Live Tour, at his Bedminster course in New Jersey, and he just said outright, because he can't help himself, but he's like, hey, look, nobody got to the bottom of 9/11, so what are you going to do? That's what Don the Con would do. Don, Teflon Don. Don, the head of whatever mafia mob Don is the head of and whatever role he plays, that's just one side of the house. But, the other side of the house that's even, I don't know if it's more outrageous, but it's easily as outrageous, and I came across this operation like a year ago. It's called Title Lock. And I happen to be, changing stations, and I mentioned this yesterday, but between, NFL football games on a Sunday afternoon, and I caught this infomercial that was like, wait a second. I had to, tune in and miss a lot of football on a Sunday, which is something I don't normally do. But I was like, what are they saying? What Newt Gingrich and his Title Lock have been saying and buying airtime on television stations around the country is to reveal some portion and a very important part of what it is that I continue to reveal to you, only they keep it focused on one aspect of it so that they can sell and exploit it to a target demographic. And this thing is so upside down, inside out, it's really not that different than Donald Trump and Jared Kushner and Stevie Mnuchin, okay? These guys are master diabolical villains. They're all straight out of Gotham, and they're all crime bosses, and they're all taking advantage of different things to basically be able to, exploit and get fees off of a larger criminal conspiracy that they don't reveal, that they're all getting paid by, and that I continue to reveal to you. Like today, I was, at first I tried not to do my normal routine where I tend to, listen to a lot of people I vector towards on YouTube. There's some really great people on YouTube, quite frankly, and then I listen to the mainstream stuff, then I read the New York Times, then I listen to other pundits and so forth, and to kind of calculate whatever's happening in my mind that day to be able to transpose and triangulate and interpret what we have the access to that reveals the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that never ended, and how it plays into everything that we're dealing with in 2023 and what we're up against and how everybody's in on it. I'm telling you, it's the emperor's new clothes on really bad acid. All of mainstream media, everybody in the vertical, our financial system, our judiciary, the military industrial complex, anybody who's got access to big money, there's a methodology of how things work. And, I didn't do that this morning. I just tried to put it all behind me because I'm dealing with my own personal struggles, some of which might be attached to me being thwarted. I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm being, in the shadows, prevented from really breaking through by what I've always imagined the whole time. I mean, we've got billions of dollars going to shadow operations that could do whatever the fuck they wanted, quite frankly. They could tell any story they want. They could get it out any way they want. They've got tech partners. They've got platforms. They've got resources. They can do whatever the fuck they want to basically lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate. I only went as far as I did because this world didn't make sense 13 years ago, and because I'm a producer and an investigative journalist and aware kind of guy, and I had access to somebody who had resources, and I, pitched in this what producers do and laid out why I thought it made sense to make this thing happen, and I did. 13 years later, we got all the answers that this entire system is hiding from you. And, I was like, just trying to check out from the whole routine and everything else, because I just got to be Tarzan in my personal life dealing with some challenges. And but lo and behold, as the day progresses, I open up my New York Times and I start to listen to some things, and then I'm reminded, and you can't escape it. It's like I'm a magnet to this stuff, and ultimately, it feels like being Neo in the Matrix because everything for me moves in slow motion now. So, for example, I found out about a couple of days ago, and then reminded today of this vector in India, a billionaire by the name of Gautam Adani. He is one of the richest guys in India. And he was involved with none other than a control fraud, which he learned from our CEOs of our financial system here, and which I've laid out to you, the methodology. And it made it on the front page of the New York Times today because he's being shorted by a group, and I love this name. It's a research group that deals with shorting, and they do their finance on grifters that they want to short. And this guy Adani in his group is one of them, and this is the way they described in the New York Times. They said he's guilty of, or they're accusing him of brazen accounting fraud, stock manipulation, and money laundering. And ironically, this group is called the Hindenburg Group, right? I mean, it's like, I don't know how many times I got to tell you. Like, another Ponzi scheme came on my radar this morning. Of all things, a $500 million Ponzi scheme targeting the Mormons. And well, that wasn't a surprise, but there you have it. And then, of course, we've been talking about Charlie Javis and, the whole $175 million scam on Chase, who's, a recidivist and probably the largest multifaceted, duplicitous financial scheme in the history of the world, quite frankly. Some I've heard on my online podcasters refer to it as Jamie laundering, something along those lines for Jamie Dimon. And, all the stuff ties into FinCEN files and so much more. But it's like, okay, when are you going to get the message? When are you going to get the message that if you're not in on it, you're on the menu? You're the prey. You're the target. If you work in the system, you make your money. You try to make some outside money. You got to invest and everything else. Yeah, if we had an honest system and everything was going the way it's supposed to, man, that's the dynamic, rising tide raises all ships, and it's brilliant. And, the bad actors get, purged in the system just based on bad decisions, and they go away. That's risk reward. That's creative destruction. But that's not what we have. We have inside pool at the highest levels where the casino is the Federal Reserve that fuels all of this stuff. And, the entire financial system is in on it. Okay. And then the media works for them. Again, I don't know how many times I have to mention this, but if what I'm saying somehow doesn't resonate, I mean, we just saw all of this in the FTX scenario with Sam Bankman-Fried. He bought media. He didn't buy just politicians. He bought media. You think he's the only one? I mean, that's what we're up against. And then the tech companies and the algos and who's trying to hide things. Going back to my, opening statement, I know that bad actors can investigate good people doing good work and whistleblowers and turn the tables, do the Trump, right? It kind of sounds like do the cha-cha, but do the Trump. Lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate. Guys, we have so much information, evidence. We've got vectors. We're trying to break through. We're trying to get the word out of how these schemes work, how they steal, how the Federal Reserve fuels it, how all of this stuff is a grift and a scam for those who are closest to the fountain, if you will, of policy. And then, of course, for the last few days, so many out there have been really highly concerned with the debt ceiling, and then also there's a lot of gambling based on what the Fed's going to do next. And I saw all morning that the Fed, this was on the front page of the New York Times. If that doesn't tell you anything, of course, what was Jerome Powell going to do? What were they going to do? Were they going to stick to their guns and increase interest rates more? Or are they going to try to create a softer landing because of all of the CPI and jobs reports and everything that make it appear that the economy is doing okay? But at the same time, if they increase interest rates too much, then the whole world's going to have a calamity. Not to mention the debt ceiling, and it's all intertwined. But I'm going to take a look at my phone and see what the market's doing now. It was down like 300 pages earlier, 300 points earlier, but now it's up. Boomerang. Now it's up on the NASDAQ over 300 points and 112 points because the Fed met expectations. They're looking for a soft landing. And so, all the big power players can trade on that, the bulls and the bears. And the bulls are making a run right now, and but all the fundamentals are out of order or out of whack. And then Debt is through the roof, personal debt and of course government debt. But whatever about government debt, I had a discussion with my colleague yesterday to point out I did make a kind of a misstatement, really. As you formulate the kind of the economic puzzle and you consider the debt ceiling in context of what the Federal Reserve can do and what the United States can do as a sovereign currency and also the world's reserve currency and all the rest of it, we don't debt finance government expenditure based on the world purchasing our bonds. That's a bit of that is a misnomer. There's no question it creates value in our markets, but value for whom? For the traders, for the guys that are getting the fees, that are selling the bonds, that are selling, investment capital all over the world and everything else. But in the end, if Congress chose that we wanted to, purge ourselves of fossil fuel tomorrow and create a giant infrastructure project, the likes of the New Deal, where we recreate the paradigm of energy and then foster all of the renewables and a new energy paradigm through the grid, and we do that overnight, the government could simply do that. We could fund that. We could make that happen. And it would probably create a much more dynamic, buoyant economy versus this globalism where all of the guys who are close to the sources of power get to create the world that we live in that's choking and polluting us to death, and they have all the control. That's the financial system. That's the financial system that was bankrupt in 2006 and 2007 when the Federal Reserve came to the rescue because they had choked on their own self-destructive fraud. But hey, no crime, no foul, no harm, no foul when you're one of these institutions because you're the primary dealer brokers. You're the too big to fail institutions. Everything's tied to you. So you can point a gun in your head and say, no, don't stop me or I'll shoot, sort of thing. It's all perverse inverse, and it's all based on control fraud. Everything that I've showed you from this guy, Gautam Adani and Charlie Jarvis, and quite frankly, Sam Bankman-Fried, those are just new versions of the same story that's been going on for the last 2 decades. But really going back to it goes back way far, but the sophistication, the first phase of this whole thing goes into the savings and loan crisis, and it evolved from there. And it's our system. And we got rid of the law above the line, which we call deregulation, desupervision, and decriminalization. And I don't know where you sit on in the food chain, but if you're not in on it and profiting immeasurably from this, you're on the menu, and you're getting freaking hosed. And I don't know if we're on this whatever that we're balancing on. I can't think of the name of it, but we could be going over the edge soon. I mean, and not to mention that on top of whatever's happening in Russia and Ukraine, and the itchy trigger, potentially nuclear war because of NATO and Putin, and then whatever's going on with Saudi and China and everything else. Look, man, we are in a very fragile state. And the United States, the people of the United States have to come together under the information that I'm providing to basically rise to the moment and purge corruption. If we don't do it, this whole world is in calamity. We have to fix ourselves before we can even consider fixing the world. Do I think that world problems don't affect us? Of course they do. But the number one national security threat, the number one threat to the entire well-being of the world is corruption. But the corruption that's already destroyed your life through the judiciary, that set up tens of millions of people using illegal documentation fabrication on mortgages that the servicers and the foreclosure mills didn't have right to stand on. And they foreclosed anyway because they got trillions of dollars to the primary dealer brokers, or I should say probably hundreds of millions because they're at the bottom of the food chain, tens of millions at least. But throughout the whole apparatus, while the primary dealer brokers got trillions, they funded just the absolute betrayal of the United States. And this is after we farmed out the golden goose, man, our infrastructure. We need to reset, and I'm not a right winger. In fact, again, I'll let you know on the board of directors of Title Lock, you've got Newt Gingrich, you've got Sean Hannity, and I know Sean Hannity is involved with predatory lending in places like Atlanta, which is really fresh that he's on this board of directors for Title Lock. It's obviously marketing, probably paid him a lot of money. Then you've got Bill O'Reilly, all of the Fox guys, and then Ben Shapiro. And I'm trying to think if I'm missing anybody. I mentioned Newt Gingrich. some heavy hitters on the right that are telling people that they can have their houses stolen, and they're marketing the 20 million people who have their houses that don't have payments, that want to protect them houses from small level players that are, crime guys that can steal, and that's what they do. There's always small level guys that can make a lot of damage for a lot of people. In fact, the guy they interview on Title Lock is a guy that got away with, I think, stealing 150 to 150 houses in the Tampa Bay area, and he went to jail for, I think, 14 years or something like that. And now this guy's a spokesperson of what he did and getting paid by Title Lock to tell white people that this can happen in the Registry of Deeds. Oh yeah, it can. But what they're not telling you are the millions of cases that targeted African Americans in the rest of the country based on all of these liar's loans that I mentioned to you that they threw in the collateralized world derivatives, nightmare that blew up the world in 2008 based on $600 trillion of derivatives. And now that notional dollar value is over a quadrillion, from what I understand. The debt's insane. That's part and parcel to, what could blow up the fucking world in part two of the 2008 great financial crisis. We never fixed this stuff. And so what Newt and company are trying to exploit is what I'm revealing to you, but just that much of it. They're not showing you the entirety of it, not to mention the fact that millions of African Americans were targeted, destroyed through straw buying and all sorts of other rackets that, that's not the target market for Newt Gingrich and company. They want white people who own their houses to pay into an insurance fund that I think you can get for free at most Registry of Deeds around the country. And they bought airtime to tell the story in the way that they want to tell it all around the country. News stations in LA, Seattle, Portland, I've looked at, Detroit, Philadelphia. Those local stations aren't reporting on what it is that I'm telling you in the entirety of this whole thing, of which, by the way, Barack Obama let Wall Street get away with this with his African-American Attorney General, Eric Holder, while 60% of African-American household wealth dissipated when the Federal Reserve was warned about this and ignored it, and then gave trillions of dollars to the people that did it. And meanwhile, here we are in 2023 with the sham, with all the worst actors. It's so Orwellian. It's the ultimate, the fucking emperor's new clothes. We've got the truth that makes you bulletproof. We need millions of people to come together to understand what's happened to our country so that we can right the ship, so that we can create the USS Enterprise out of the USS Titanic. We've got to be heroes. Where are the heroes that aren't cowards, that aren't in on it? I always say that this is really whores. What do I say? I say pimps, whores, and junkies. And that's the elites. And then there's the sheep, and then now there's Nazis. I mean, it's almost like I'm watching, it's some sort of like Mel Brooks meets what I just saw in Amsterdam, for example, David Russell. But yeah, it goes on, and it's global, and it happens every day, in every direction. And yet we can't stop it until we know what's going on. And the media is in on it. Put yourself in my shoes. And I hope, and I think I mentioned this at the outset, I don't pray, because God's busy doing other things. But I do believe in a higher power, and I do believe that, things make sense. And I do believe in good versus evil. And I think that there's more of us that are good. I think more of us are heroes. I think more of us are willing to rise to the moment if we have the information, especially if we've been victimized by it. But instead, we're all like, it's like herding cats. And it's herding cats in a way that the cats have no information and no way to defend themselves, until you wake up and you transform into a wolf. Let's put it that way. And then we get busy being a wolf pack to overcome the madness. I don't know. By the way, that's my nickname. So there's that. And by the way, Lovell means the wolf. And 13, the number 13 means revolution, which was the 13 original, colonies of the United States that, had the revolution against tyranny. And it's all over the dollar bill, ironically. 13 steps of the pyramid to the all-seeing eye of Providence, 13 quivers, in the left talon, I think, to indicate the warring, ideology of the United States in the case if it's up against tyranny, and then also doves on the right because of peace, and then of course the eagle rises above the clouds to see, clarity and rise to the knowledge of justice And that's what it is that I'm selling. I've got to sell you on liberty and justice for all. I've got to sell you on being a citizen. I've got to sell you on being informed, because we're not. And if you can afford it while I'm selling you, in recognition and in honor of the original 13 colonies, if you can donate $13 to our cause, we're going to use that to organize. If 16 million filed foreclosures equates to 48 million to 50 million people, and maybe 10% of them, 500,000 or whatever, donated $13, we'd be in the money to be able to organize in a real way, to be able to connect the dots and overwhelm this thing. And I'll tell you this, on the right, and I'll give this to the right, when they decide they're going to get all in, they get all in. Newt Gingrich, Sean Hannity, Ben Shapiro, and the others that are involved with Title Lock, it's like, hey man, we're gonna create this situation, and we're all in, and then the right's gonna fucking pay for it. And the same with Trump and his sort of scenario. The right goes after it. They'll you know what? It's like pass the hat around in church. Everybody's gonna donate to the cause. Everybody's gonna get in line, do what we're told. I'm independent, but I'm telling you, those who are independent, we can't remain in silos. This isn't an identity race scenario. This is systemic corruption. This is a class war. And if the system worked and we held power to account and the bad actors, the criminal syndicate, went to prison, we wouldn't have this problem. But since they didn't go to prison, and because nobody knows what actually happened, this problem is getting worse, if that's even possible. Thanks for listening. Onwards and upwards.